Ja tervetuloa Tyrnävä Showhun. Andrei Martyanov, Naton loppu. Erittäin kiinnostava aihe. Mutta ennen sitä otetaan tämmöinen lyhyt tietopläjäys. Morjentes! Tyrnävä Shown tietopläjäys. 3 pointtia. Miten ravinteet vaikuttavat terveyteen antaen virtaa ja pidentäen jopa elinikää? Elämme nopeasti päivittyvässä maailmassa, työelämä muuttuu ja uusia ansaintavaihtoehtoja elannon hankkimiseen aukeaa. Eli tarvitsetko elämääsi uusia ansaintamahdollisuuksia? Tuntuvatko omat piirit jo nähdyiltä ja loppuun käydyltä? Haluatko uusia yrittäjävetoisia ihmisiä ja kansainvälisiä verkostoja elämääsi? Vastatessasi kyllä vähintään yhteen kohtaan, laita mailia, niin kerron lisää. tyrnäväshow@gmail.com. Yhteydenottoihin Tyrnävä Show kiittää. Jep. Ja nyt sitten itse aiheeseen, joka on äärimmäisen kiinnostava. Ja tämä tulee taas on norjalaisen professorin Glenn Diesenin vieraana. Siinä. Eli Andrei Martyanov. Ja nyt tulee kiinnostavat 17 minuuttia. Niin tässä on taas automaattikäännöksellä tehty noin suomenkieliset tekstit. Eli jos ei englanti taitu, niin sen saa siitä pääpiirteissään ymmärrettyä oikein hyvin. Ja tämä on oikein kiinnostava asia, niin lähdetäänpä katsoa.
Hi everyone, and welcome. Today we are joined by Andrei Martyanov, an author and military analyst, an expert on the Russian military as well as naval strategy. We can also add that Martyanov is a former officer, but later on also a director in commercial aerospace in the United States. Welcome back to the program.
My pleasure.
I wanted to discuss with you the current developments as well as the weakening position of NATO, not just in Ukraine, but the overall structure. But first, I guess a good point or a good place to start is this seemingly failed peace plan. That is, President Trump pushed this peace plan, which was immediately rejected by Zelensky, and shortly thereafter, Russia started a very powerful missile and drone strike on Ukraine, and this was then followed up by offensive across the front line, it seems, in which Russia has broken through several of the defense lines in Ukraine. So now I guess around Chasiv and Toretsk especially is of great importance. I was just wondering first, what do you make of these developments? And do you think the Russians are pursuing a military solution now that I guess diplomatic one seems somewhat weak?
I think military solution never was off the table to start with. It's just kind of like background thing. And whatever happens after this, because it's a battlefield. If anybody thinks that the diplomacy itself is going to solve something, I want to remind my favorite quotation from Zhou Enlai, the premier of China, in 1954, that he rephrased famous Clausewitzian dictum that, but he turned it 180 degrees or 360 degrees per Annalena Baerbock, that the diplomacy is the continuation of the war by other means. Battlefield and balance of power always decided everything and will continue to decide. Diplomats merely act upon the realities on the ground. They try to, bend them and turn them into the favor of the country they represent. But truth is, it's battlefield. And in terms of military solution, so to speak, it never was in doubt. Everybody understands now, especially after what has been committed in Kursk Oblast, especially the level of atrocities they committed, that there will be no, classic ceasefire in the sense of what Mr. Trump wants, because he doesn't want peace. He wants ceasefire. Russians want peace, and Russians wanting peace is predicated on destroying Zelensky regime. And not only Zelensky regime. Zelensky is merely the puppet, actually. It is the regime itself, which is obviously fed from the by the Western money, Western special services, especially nowadays with United Kingdom, which plays a critical role in all this mayhem, and the United States still being part of it. So it's military solution all along, and after that, it's the what would be called the operations by the special forces and intelligence services and Ministry of Internal Affairs to clean up what will be remaining of this Nazi regime. Let's go, and let's say what it is. It is, and it's pretty much military.
Yeah, well, it's interesting with this ceasefire. I mean, Macron recently made some comments to the media in which he said, if Putin wants peace, actually, Putin doesn't want peace. He said he's lying, because if he wanted peace, he wouldn't be attacking Ukraine. So it was very, clear dichotomy. So either, you're for peace and don't do any attacks, or you're a liar. But in the same segment, he also calls for an unconditional ceasefire. And given that Putin hasn't accepted this, that means he doesn't want peace.
Quand le président Poutine parle aux négociateurs américains, il leur dit « je veux la paix ». Quand il parle à la planète entière, il dit « moi je veux la paix ». Il continue de bombarder l'Ukraine. Il continue de tuer des vies en Ukraine. Il n'y a qu'une seule réponse qu'on attend. Est-ce que le président Poutine est d'accord pour un cessez-le-feu inconditionnel?
I watched it, and what struck me, I guess, was it seemed a bit deceptive, because if you wanted peace, you would talk about the political settlement. Again, when you say unconditional ceasefire, it implies you leave out the entire political solution. But wouldn't that just be another Minsk agreement? And if so, what would be required for Russia, you think, to accept political what kind of political settlement would have to be accepted to end the war?
I just can quote Lavrov, and I can quote Putin actually too. And root causes, remove root causes, and then there you go. So let's talk. But the problem is, of course, and as have been stated many times by many people, me included, that it's peremptory. It's designed to be rejected, because Russians are not stupid. They understand the nature of the modern West, or for that matter, even the old West. And the idea behind essentially NATO, Article 5 and all that, it's all about that. It's going to be rejected. But Russians are not in a hurry, because they see the dynamics within NATO. And as many military professionals spoke about it, NATO is a dead man walking, So, and Russians have no reason to rush to anything, because in the end, it is going to be primarily a modus vivendi between Russia and United States, if United States matures enough to deal with this in a proper way. Europe, as I am on record for the last 10 years, essentially, it doesn't matter in many respects, because it has no resources to continue to, create any kind of the real military threat in the first quarter of the 21st century. If, God forbid, somebody will have enough stupidity, if you wish, to do something about it, Europe will be turned into the parking lot, and that will take only 25 minutes. But they know it. And that is why, when, for example, we talk about Macron, it is all verbal maneuvering, period. There is no substance behind it. The economies of Europe are hollow when it comes down to their real correlation forces and means. Their militaries, I mean, if you look attentively at the French military, which is the best military by default in Europe, it's a joke. I mean, it's not a military. I mean, if you look attentively at the levels of their technical readiness of their, for example, already minuscule park of, let's say, tanks or air force, it's a third world with some pieces of the modern technology, and they do not have any kind of integrated system of running the modern 21st century warfare. United States doesn't have it anymore, but forget about France or Germany. Bundeswehr is worse than a joke. It's non-existent military force. The same goes for the United Kingdom. So if they think that they can somehow issue all those or provide the mission of some money which will merely, accelerate the inflation, high level of inflation, they will not buy much for it anyway. But then again, you need the critical and systemic modernization and reforms of its military. They cannot do that. There's nothing there.
Well, you just called NATO a dead man walking, and I'm reminded of an article in the Washington Post back in 2023 after the very disastrous counteroffensive, which the Americans and British pushed the Ukrainians to do, even against the advice of military commanders within Ukraine. So it was an interesting case study of who was actually running the war. Anyways, in that article, it called, despite the massacre of the Ukrainian army, it said obviously it wasn't a victory for Ukraine, but it has been a victory for NATO, it said, because in quite a windfall, I think the word was, a great success, because it had created more demand for NATO. Now suddenly NATO has obviously realized that it has still had purpose. NATO was expanding. Germany had thrown away all ambitions about working with Russia and would instead militarize. And suddenly the whole military bloc was focused. We have a new enemy again, a purpose. And but I think a lot of this was premised on defeating the Russians in Ukraine. And in contrast, it appears that NATO has been defeated. That is, it does not have any more weapons. And now we see the United States pulling out, not just out of Ukraine, but they're also very openly expressing the desire to pull out of Europe and will prioritize, has a strategic priorities around the world, such as Asia or the Western Hemisphere. So with the absence of the Americans, the Europeans will likely be divided as well, which begs the question, what is happening to this Cold War bloc with the Soviet Union obviously long gone? What do you see of the future of NATO, though? Is it can it recover from this? Because I remember saying, well, like a year ago, that the future of NATO was a bit uncertain, and it was dismissed as all Russian propaganda. This is, it would recover and it would be stronger than ever. But even now, some of those people, appear to be smearing, recognizes that things are not going well within the military bloc.
Well, first, we need to keep in mind that all normal people, mentally sound and competent, they do not work in the Washington Post or New York Times. There are very few of them, if any, in Council for Foreign Relations. Then you go into the British think tanks. It's a circus, essentially. It's a bunch of the nincompoops, the clowns, with credentialed imbeciles running around pretending that they're making out of the thin air things which they do not understand, obviously. They pretend that they know what strategy is. They don't. There's not a single American general who understands actually what strategy is, let alone if we talk about European. So Europeans will be back at the square one, but this time under the sword of Damocles of Russian nuclear and conventional potential, and they will do probably what they were doing for the last 1,000 years, going at the throats of each other. So that's what it is. That's what Europe is, essentially, for all its great achievements, which we venerate and we love them, which were born essentially out of the constant warfare and killing each other in industrial quantities. So Europe will be back at it, and Russians don't care if they will begin to cut each other, completely, because in the end, it's, Russians have their own national interest and they don't care as long as it stays away from Russia. So, in this respect, I can quote only Douglas MacGregor, Colonel Douglas MacGregor, Colonel Daniel Davis. They were on record about 2 weeks ago on their show, and Doug MacGregor stated, Danny, you remember, 97, we have been in Germany. I already told you that NATO is the dead man walking. We knew it's not a real military alliance. It's a bunch of basically it's a laundromat. And so anybody who comes from Washington Post or whatever, and tries to pretend and put the fine and joyful face on, you have to be an imbecile, honestly, to say that, we got defeated. We got defeated at Krinky. We got defeated in counteroffensive. By the time we were planning counteroffensive, second iteration of the armed forces of Ukraine together with mercenaries have been finished off. It's like, dudes, you do not even understand what war is. And this is the issue which cannot be addressed apart from the economic issues, apart from the issues of the technology, R&D, technological development, the way you have to go with the tactical and operational realities. You just literally cannot explain this to them, because most of them, not all, some of them do understand this. And like Macron, can you imagine me explaining to Macron what correlation of forces and means is? Many French generals don't understand that. Some do, though. And they're already writing the, letters to him, open letters and things of this nature. It's a mayhem. And we are dealing with the world where the financial capitalism, as it was, the parasite, as Michael Hudson says, is collapsing the civilization. Because in the end, as strange as it sounds, Vladimir Lenin, you may not, I'm not communist. I mean, I'm not Marxist, but I use, Marxist method when need be. And you read Lenin's famous article, it's the whole work, actually, pretty substantial. Imperialism is the highest stage of the development of capitalism. My gosh, he predicted it all. Banking, financial capitalism, which begins to consume productive societies of the West. And that is exactly what had happened. And now you have this bunch of nincompoop who only know how to make money out of the thin air. They believe that stock market somehow reflects the economy, and they have been essentially taken by somebody and smashed, across the brick wall of the reality. And reality is a very different thing. And when we look attentively at this, NATO is over, essentially. I cannot even imagine how they can now, if you leave Europeans alone. The United States is not going to abandon NATO completely. It's all, of course, it's all PR and it's all Trump's hot air ballooning. But the point is, if you look attentively at the technical foundation of NATO, it is obsolete. And I'm talking about the United States too. It is absolutely obsolete. The thing which drives modern geopolitics, it's not some kind of the ideas. Most of them are detached from the reality. It's the real military industrial potentials and COFM, correlation of forces and means. This is what the main engine of the history. That's why, Marxists and Soviet, Russian Marxists understood this. That's why they hated in the West, because they suddenly say, we know this magic thing, magic wand, that this is how you have to talk to the West. And that's why they hate everybody, and they had Stalin because he industrialized Soviet Union and things of this nature, which in the end, the 9th of May coming, Victory Day, and defeated essentially what Europe has become at that time, because it wasn't just Hitler or Germany, it was the whole Europe which invaded Soviet Union. So, and what can I say? They are not happy, but nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, it looks like after the EU.
No, siinä tuli painavaa sanaa. Ja silloin kun Varsovan liitto loppui, niin silloin olisi pitänyt loppua NATOnkin, niin kaikki olisi mennyt huomattavasti paremmin. Ja NATO is a dead man walking. Että Douglas MacGregor sanonut sen jo 90-luvulla. Ja jos me Suomessa vaalittaisiin meidän omia intressejämme ja tehtäisiin kahdenvälisiä sopimuksia eri maiden kanssa ja pidettäisiin sopimukset yllä, eikä mentäisi mukaan suurvaltojen konflikteihin, meidän tilanne on ihan toinen. Ja nyt kun me näemme tästä velkakellosta, niin 173 miljardia ja sitten on 348 miljoonaa jo siihen päälle. Eli me otetaan yli 200 miljoonaa euroa uutta valtionvelkaa per joka ikinen viikko. Tämä on täys tuhontie, missä me nyt Suomessa ollaan. Ja EU on loinen, joka imee meiltä niin kuin veren ja energian ja elinvoiman johonkin omaan isoon epäsikiönsä. Ja niin kuin tuossa toi Andrei sanoi, se on heikko. Eurooppa on heikko tällä hetkellä. Suomi on todella heikko. Voitteko kuvitella nämä minipurka-tyypit, jotka siellä eduskunnassa seisoo, ja niin kuin Jussi Halla-aho nämä, niin nämäkö johtaisi 5,5 miljoonan kansakunnan jotain maailman suurinta ydinasevaltiota vastaan voitolliseen sotaan, kunhan täällä Suomessa vaikka vedetään housut auki ja katsotaan housujen sisään, niin ei tiedetä mitä sukupuolta olemme. Me olemme nyt New World Orderia, sitä mitä niin kuin minäkin aikoinaan perussuomalaisessa vastustin niin kuin viimeiseen veripisaraan saakka olisin tehnyt. Eli sitä vastaan meidän pitää taistella, joka meistä on tullut. Ja Jussi Halla-ahosta on tullut Darth Vader. Valonkaan tästä tuli langennut enkeli. No niin, tämmöinen jakso. Ja niin, mä linkkaan tuon Glenn Diesenin haastattelu, se on tunnin haastattelu tuosta Andreesta, niin voitte katsoa sen kokonaan. Mä otin vain nyt lyhyen alun siitä, missä tuli niin kuin tosi oleellista, kiinnostavaa asiaa. Ja mä suosittelen teitä, niin ottakaa viikoittaiseen seurantaan toi Glenn Diesenin kanava, jos teitä kiinnostaa geopolitiikkaa. No niin, terveiset tätä vappuisesta Tyrnävä Shown Datsalta. No niin, morjetta ja hyvää vappua.